for smearing a Baltimore congressional district as a, quote, disgusting rat and rodent-infested mess, saying no human being would want to live there.
Welcome to an all-new edition of Viral. I'm your host, as always, Kenny Dix here. Glad you use the hashtag Viral as we talk about Good Morning Baltimore. Well, we're not talking about, it's a good thing. Baltimore is that Baltimore. But it's like Trump versus Baltimore in terms of the emphasis we're talking about. As the city of Baltimore has been scrutinized in the media as President Trump takes to Twitter and blasts Representative Elijah Cummings over the city's misappropriated funds, not being dirtiness, stuff that President Trump trying to blast Elijah Cummings for. Well, let's relive some moments where the president set his sights on Baltimore and called out Elijah Cummings for not keeping the city clean, maintaining the city's reputation and its growth development. Here's a news report with this.
Now to President Trump tonight defending himself against allegations of racism after a torrent of tweets criticizing Congressman Elijah Cummings and his Baltimore district, describing it as a rat and rodent-infested mess. The president says Cummings is the racist. ABC's Kira Phillips at the White House.
Maryland's Republican governor denouncing President Trump for smearing a Baltimore congressional district as a, quote, disgusting rat and rodent-infested mess, saying no human being would want to live there.
The comments are just outrageous and inappropriate.
The president's comments were aimed at Congressman Elijah Cummings after the veteran lawmaker took the head of the Department of Homeland Security to task over conditions in migrant detention centers.
What does that mean when a child is sitting in their own feces, can't take a shower? Come on, man. What's that about?
Cummings is the fifth congressperson of color that the president has targeted this month alone. In one racist tweet, he suggested 4 congresswomen go back to the countries they came from, even though all of them are citizens and 3 were born in the United States. He's also used the phrase crime-infested to describe the congressional district of civil rights icon John Lewis. Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney grilled by Chris Wallace of Fox News.
Infested. It sounds like vermin. It sounds subhuman. And these are all 6 members of Congress who are people of color.
I think you're spending way too much time reading between the lines.
I'm not reading between the lines. I'm reading the lines.
The president doubling down today as part of a strategy to energize his base of white rural voters before the election. He's taking aim at a new target, the Reverend Al Sharpton. The 2 men have been friendly before. But when Sharpton tweeted he was heading to Baltimore, the president blasted him as a con man who hates whites and cops.
He has a particular venom for blacks and people of color. He doesn't refer to any of his other opponents or critics as infested. He never said that their districts or their states are places that no human being wants to live.
And Kira Phillips with us live from the White House tonight. And Kira, President Trump insists his attacks on Congressman Cummings are not racist. What's the congressman saying about this tonight?
Well, David, Congressman Cummings tweeting, Mr. President, I go home to my district daily. Each morning I wake up and I go and fight for my neighbors. His hometown paper, David, less diplomatic. The Baltimore Sun writing, quote, better to have a few rats than to be one.
All right, as you see right there, tit for tat words between Trump and Cummings. Trump intimidating Cummings because Cummings is on board to investigate Trump over his finances, and Trump doesn't like that one bit at all. The president tries to get even. He even one of his advisors defend his actions towards the community over Baltimore. Watch this.
This administration, and I want to say this expressly to Mary Young and Michael Steele and Al Sharpton, who today called out the president and said, let President Trump put his money where his mouth is. Well, boys and girls, I have a message for you. President Trump has given $16 billion in 2018 alone to Elijah Cummings district and federal grants. We have given more money in homeless funds to Baltimore than the last administration. We have given more money in community development grants than the last administration to Baltimore. My question to you guys is this: what are you actually doing with the money so that it benefits residents in the community for once instead of deep pocket crooked politicians?
And I know we're going to get into more.
All right, Lynn, not only she feels that way, even pundits and reverends decide to call out the president's rhetoric with this special edition of What the People Say. Watch this.
This morning, the president attacked another member of Congress on Twitter. This time, it's House Oversight Committee Chairman Elijah Cummings. He wrote this: Cummings' district is a disgusting, rat and rodent-infested mess. If he spent more time in Baltimore, maybe he could help clean up this very dangerous and filthy place. No human being would want to live there. Infested. That's usually reserved for references to rodents and insects, but we've seen the president invoke infestation to criticize lawmakers before. You see a pattern here? Just 2 weeks ago, President Trump attacked 4 minority congresswomen. Why don't they go back to the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came? Reminder, 3 of them were born here. All of them are American. Infested, he says. A week before his inauguration, January 2017, Congressman John Lewis should spend more time on fixing and helping his district, which is in horrible shape and falling apart, not to mention crime-infested. Donald Trump has tweeted more than 43,000 times. He's insulted thousands of people, many different types of people. But when he tweets about infestation, it's about black and brown people. September 2014, at the height of an urgent health emergency, why are we sending thousands of ill-trained soldiers into Ebola-infested areas of Africa? Bring the plague to the U.S.? Obama is so stupid. Infested, he says. There's a revolution going on in California. So many sanctuary areas want out of this ridiculous crime-infested and breeding concept. Infested, he says. The president says about Congressman Cummings' district, that no human would want to live there. You know who did, Mr. President? I did. From the day I was brought home from the hospital to the day I left for college. And a lot of people I care about still do. There are challenges, no doubt. But people are proud of their community. I don't want to sound self-righteous, but people get up and go to work there. They care for their families there. They love their children who pledge allegiance to the flag, just like people who live in districts of congressmen who support you, sir. They are Americans too. We'll be right back.
And he wants to take us back. Donald Trump says he wants to make America great again. Well, what does again mean? Back before the Civil Rights Act? Back before the Voting Rights Act? Back before Roe v. Wade? Back before the Fair Housing Act? Because we're not going back. We are not going back. And when he looks at women of color who are serving their country in the United States Congress, women who chose to become public servants, women who have been duly elected by their constituents, women who have sworn an oath to defend the Constitution of the United States from all enemies, foreign and domestic, and he tells them to go back to where they came from, what do we say? We're not going back. We're not going back. And in fact, I'll tell y'all where we're going. We're going to the White House. That's where we're going.
To me, this is an incredibly dangerous moment and thing the president is doing. Is if you think about this, Baltimore specifically, a few miles from here, to Madison Square Garden, there's a statue of Joe Gans, who's probably considered one of the best boxers of all time. First African-American to win a world championship in boxing in the early 1900s. African-American from Baltimore. Baltimore was the site of Fort McHenry which is where the Star Spangled Banner was written, which is our national anthem in this president, it's not only divisive and it's not only not a winning political strategy. He knows there's an element in America today that this appeal to racial divisiveness, racist language has been successful. It was successful to a degree with George Wallace. It was successful to a degree with many other people that are around Strom Thurmond and around this country. And when we do this, we don't unify it together as a country, and it puts African Americans, Latinos, Muslims, any group that you can see is not white Christian and probably male, creates incredible battle in our country. And it's one of the things that, to me, is dangerous to our democracy.
As for his attacks on me personally, Donald Trump, and I've known each other 25 years. I've marched on him with Central Park 5. I've dealt with him on the birther issue. He can say what he wants. Call me a troublemaker? Yes, I make trouble for bigots. I made trouble for him with Central Park. I made trouble with him for birtherism. I'm going to keep making trouble for bigots. As far as me being a con man, if he really thought I was a con man, he'd be nominating me for his cabinet. So he doesn't believe that, because if you remember, right after he was elected, he called me personally and asked me to come meet with him. And he sent Omarosa to come and meet with me. So he doesn't believe that, but he's playing a race divisive card. We are here to talk about how we build together and get something done. Little did I know that Mr. Trump was going to, on the eve of this, attack the congressman from this city. And not only the congressman, but the people of this city in the most bigoted and racist way. He attacks everybody. I know Donald Trump, he's not mature enough to take criticism. He can't help it. He's like a child. Somebody says something, he reacts. He's thin-skinned and not really matured that well. But he has a particular venom for blacks and people of color. He doesn't refer to any of his other opponents or critics as infested. He does not attack their districts. He attacks Nancy Pelosi, he attacks Chuck Schumer, he attacks other whites, but he never said that their districts or their states are places that no human being wants to live. The fact of the matter is, Elijah Cummings' district is the most well-educated and middle-class aspiring district of blacks in this country.
You can't talk that way about our country, not when I'm the president. First, he's misconstruing and misrepresenting what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman, said in the use of the word garbage. But so now his supporters will say, I mean, first it was, you can't talk that way. Now it's, yeah, but look at Baltimore. What are people just going to follow along? And where is the rest of his party? April.
The hypocrisy is right there in our face. You can't talk about our country, but Baltimore is part of this country. Let's go to Francis Scott Key. Let's go to the Star Spangled Banner. Oh, say, can you see? This is Baltimore. I'm Baltimore. We're Baltimore. All of us. Because it's Baltimore today. It will be another city tomorrow. We are Baltimore. Hashtag we are Baltimore. But I'm going to say this to you. For him to use the word, and I'm going to, Victor, just bear with me for a minute, to talk about infested. Mr. President, where's your urban renewal plan for Baltimore and cities like Baltimore? Don't talk about it, be about it, okay? This is now the reporter hat's off, because this is ridiculous. And then on top of that, you talk about infested. You know, the city that's infested. You're living in a house that's infested with mice. You, Mr. President, are living in a house that's infested with mice, stink bugs, and anything else. So if we want to start talking about infestation, start talking from where you live. What's running across your covers at night? Now, if you really want to get into the history of the word infested, let's talk about the word infested when it was used against our Jewish brothers and sisters during the Holocaust. There are awful references that this president is making, and it needs to stop. This president said last week or 2 weeks ago when all of this squad issue came up, that he enjoys this. He's enjoying it at other people's peril. It's not right. If he's the moral leader and the leader of this nation, it's not right.
Yeah, Paul, let me finish up with you here. There's this op-ed that's been co-signed by 149 African-American staffers in the Obama administration, condemning what they've seen from the president, those tweets. I mean, this came out before we heard about, saw the tweets from Baltimore talking about those 4 minority congresswomen. Congressman Ro Khanna of California said that it's time for President Obama, for Mrs. Obama to come out and start delivering some speeches. Should they? And what about President Bush? I mean, this should not be left as a partisan issue. If we're calling for one president to come out, should President Bush not come out? Should there be some rebuttal from that level, from the former holders of that office? Paul, your take.
I do. President Obama and Mrs. Obama, they carried so much freight for so very long that I think they have a right to try to stand back. President Obama yesterday did retweet a column highly critical of President Trump, but there is this sort of code they don't want to do that. I do think you make an interesting point about President Bush, but also about the current Republican leaders. They have to call out their own. Okay, if President Obama stands up, he opposed Donald Trump in a campaign, obviously, where he's in a different party. Republican leaders have to stand up.
Wow. At the end, Representative Elijah Cummings rejected the idea of Baltimore being nasty, dirty, unsafe place to live with the conditions in his recent interview with ABC News. Watch this.
I know you said the events this week reminded you of 1962. You're 12 years old, trying to integrate a pool in Baltimore.
That's right, George. We were trying to integrate a Olympic-sized pool near my house, and we had been constrained to a wading pool in the Black community. We tried to integrate it, and as we did march towards that pool over a course of 6 days, I was beaten and all kinds of rocks and bottles thrown at me. And the interesting thing is that I heard the same kind of chants. Go home. You don't belong here. And they called us the N-word over and over and over again. And George, I got to tell you that I'm not the only person of color who has had those kind of experiences. And what it does when Trump does these things, when the president does these things, it brings up the same feelings that I had over 50 some years ago. And it's very, very painful. It's extremely divisive. And I just don't think that this is becoming of the president of the United States of America, the leader of the entire world. We can do better than that. I don't care what anybody says. And I think our Republican friends have to stand up and say, not that just that it might be inappropriate. No, they got to go further than that and say, Mr. President, you're absolutely wrong.
All right. Regardless of what you think about the city's responsibility to keep people safe and sound all the time, let's just hope, Representative Cummings comes out this looking good and trying to defend his record over Baltimore, that the president tries to want to pick fights and pick at him. So, hey, leave us your comments, your concerns about Baltimore, Trump versus Baltimore, what we called it Good Morning Baltimore. I've been your host, Kate Dixon, in so long, and we'll see you next time here on Doc.